right, here we are with Kelly Ford and David Poindexter. I am Clint Patterson, Ecosystem Manager here at DNN Corp, and I'm sitting with two DNN rock stars here. So I want you guys to introduce yourselves. So if someone is watching this and they don't know who Kelly Ford is, who is Kelly Ford?
Well, I've been around the community, DNN, since the version 1 days, and have probably prior to the last couple of years best known for commercial module I built called XMod Pro. That's been, it's on the bestseller list for the periodically throughout the years. Recently, though, most people might know me from my prompt contribution to the recently released version 9.2 of DNN. And also now spearheading the new revitalized DNN documentation project. So been around a long time. Haven't been as involved with the community until recent few years, but always hanging around doing stuff.
Gotcha. That is awesome. All right, David, who is David Poindexter?
Well, I'm David Poindexter, and I've like Kelly. I've been in the community for quite some time, since the beginning days, and was originally building iBuySpy modules back in the day before DNN even existed. So, kind of been around, and I run a creative marketing and app development company here in Greater Charlotte area, North Carolina. So, and recently just been kind of a little bit all over the map, I guess, in the DNN community, just trying to help where I can.
Gotcha. So, we're coming to the community here inside of a DNN Digest spotlight area or feature. And so I wanted to highlight DNN community leaders in this segment. And so you guys are doing some leadership things here lately. And before I kind of get into some of those questions, you guys kind of mentioned a little bit some of your recent activities, lately here in the community. And so I want to give you guys just a little plug or segment where you can talk about some of the stuff that you've been doing recently. Kelly, you mentioned the docs. So if you want to elaborate a little bit about that. Now, we should say 9.2 just shipped, and prompt is awesome. Now, let's not take that away. So CLI for DNN, it rocks. If you haven't seen it, there's tons of material out there on it, but Kelly is the man that led the team, and he's behind prompt. But recently, the blogs and stuff like that about documentation. What do you have to say about that?
A lot to say that probably won't fit into the video. But basically, I said I've been around since version 1 days of DNN and developing for it. And probably the biggest annoyance that I've had with DNN over those years is the documentation or lack thereof, or the fact that it was spread out amidst forum posts and Stack Overflow posts and wikis and blogs and some attempts at documentation. You could never find what you needed in one place. And it was, you could spend hours trying to find your information that you needed just to answer a question. Yeah. And eventually you ended up digging through the source code to get the answer for it. So I got annoyed finally and said, this is an area, because people talked about the quality of the documentation and prompt. I figured that this is an area that I believe in documentation and the quality of it and what it can do for a platform or any tool, really. It's a make or break for many tools. You can have the greatest tool in the world, but if you don't have good documentation, people aren't going to use it. And DNN is a development platform. So if we don't have good development documentation, we're not going to be able to attract developers. And without a lot of developers feeding into the ecosystem, the community will stagnate. So I view this as my own personal quixotic, possibly, adventure at developing the documentation for DNN. But of course, it really has to be a community effort, and that's why I jumped in, and I'm getting a lot of good response from people. David actually is joining in, and you and Peter Donker and some other people are helping to kick this off, and I'm looking forward to doing more.
Awesome. Appreciate it. So David, you, if we look at the kind of myriad of tasks that you're involved in, so you run a user group in Charlotte, you're on the leadership team, you have donated NV QuickSight, which you can install DNN in less than a minute if people don't know. as a OSS contribution to the community, and you recently organized all of the archives, right? So you've been very busy, and so talk a little bit, if you will, about what you did with the archives, because I don't know if people really know all that went into it and what it means and where they can find things.
Yeah, so you know, for I don't know, last several months, it's been a pretty frequent thing in the social sphere, you know, DNN social sphere, for people to ask where to get this version, you know, of DNN version 6 dot whatever, you know, or 7 dot whatever. And ever since Codeplex archived everything, it's not been obvious where you can get things. So an effort went underway to organize all of the history of DNN releases, installs, update packages, starter kits, and all that into some several different archive repos set up by DNN Corp. And I was able to be involved in that and to try to help organize some of it. It was quite the effort to go through the Codeplex archive, and you would think it would have been much more simple than it was, but it ended up being pretty crazy getting through it. I think all in all, maybe about 5 days solid of effort there to try to get all that organized and published to GitHub. So now everything's nice and organized, and you can get every version from the initial release all the way up to the most current release of DNN in the archive repos.
Awesome. Yeah, a lot of times, you know, they're contributions, and it's easy just to download and use whatever it is, but like you don't really think about the energy and effort that goes behind like things just being there for you and being available. So I mentioned that we're in the kind of like spotlight area of the DNN Digest in this video. In the editor's note, which is my little blurb at the top that people usually skip, you know, when they get the digest. In this version or edition, I am alluding to something special that is happening in the community. And so I have my own thoughts and opinions, but I want to hear what you guys had to say. So Kelly, your name's been coming up a lot lately in the community because of the prompt contribution and also because of the documentation. But even beyond doing the documentation effort, you're being very open and transparent and writing a lot of blogs and like really communicating with people about what's going on. So my question to you is, why is that? Why am I now learning about Kelly Ford, hearing Kelly Ford, seeing this kind of leader emerge here in the community?
Well, when it comes to the documentation project, it has to be a community effort. It's, you know, documentation for a platform the size of DNN is a huge undertaking. And if it were just me alone, it would fail as a project. And I think that is been part of the reason it has failed in the past. I mean, I don't want to denigrate what we have. We have some good documentation and some good documentation efforts that have been engaged in the past. But the idea is that this is for the community. The community is going to be using the documentation. And if they're not involved in telling the team what they need and what they've wanted, what they've missed all of these years, then it's going to, even if we finish the project, it's going to fail because it won't have accomplished its goal, which is to serve the needs of the community and developers, especially at this point in the community. So I think it's incumbent to try to be as open and communicative about that as possible. Now, there's some things we just have to talk about as a team because you can't have 1,000 people trying to input. But I want to provide, especially through the blogs, really an indication of what our thinking is, where we're at, invite comments on that so that we can evolve our thinking as we go through this process. I don't want to overanalyze things because all too often the perfect can be the enemy of the good, especially when you're talking about lots and lots of people who are putting in their own 2 cents. So I think the blog is a really good way for me to kind of digest what we've done in our weekly meetings in the group and put that together with my thoughts, my ambitions for the project and communicate that to the community, and get some feedback. Are we on the right course? Are we heading in the right direction? If not, let me know in those comments, and it becomes a nice communication platform, ongoing communication, I should say, with the community. That's the primary reason that I'm doing that. But even more so, I want to have more people than myself actively engaged in the community,
Right.
because one person, 10 people are not going to be enough to grow an ecosystem. We need hundreds of people who are actively engaged in doing things. We have to work in parallel. And only by doing that, not just with the documentation, but great things like David is doing, only through doing those kinds of projects are we going to really grow a vibrant community.
Right. Yeah. So David, similar question for you. In the blog that you posted about the archives, you didn't title that blog like DNN Archives. You were like answering the DNN call. So why is that? Why was the blog titled that? And because it was like, as I was reading, obviously it was information about I could go to the archives and download. But more than that, it was like, hey, I'm trying to, contribute. And again, we're hearing and seeing more from David Poindexter. So why is that?
Well, I mean, similar to what Kelly was saying is that, what we're trying to do here and shifting, and turning around this community and moving back towards the good, it can't be one or two or three people, doing some great things. So instead of just posting something that's, hey, look at what I've done, or tooting my own horn, it's more of, hey, this is an example of how you can help, how you can get involved. With a platform this size, with integration possibilities as vast as they are, there's always something that we don't like, or something that is not working the way we believe it should work, or doesn't meet our needs exactly. So, too often we fall into the trap of just complaining, about that. And that's easy to do, and it's understandable. It's valid. But I wanted to make a call, for people to get involved and actually to do something about the thing that you need, or the missing component that you see, or the missing functionality that you see, or the bad user experience that you experience. Get involved, contribute where you can, because we all have unique skills that we can offer to community, and you don't have to be a developer to do so. So, for instance, taking these archives, I did not need to know anything about code, to do that. I just needed to have some organizational skills. So I went through and did that, so it was a good example. And I felt like that was a good way to kind of lead by example, there, and call others to do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier to sit in the crowd and be critical or be the armchair quarterback than to be the quote unquote man in the arena, right?
Yeah.
But kind of stepping back, if we look at both of the things that you guys have done or are doing, which is documentation and filing archive or creating archive releases. In the past, that would be something that everybody in the community would just think, well, DNN Corp's going to do that, right? DNN Corp will handle the documentation and they'll handle the archive releases. Or if the archive releases aren't there, I'm going to tweet to DNN Corp or just make a Facebook post and, criticize DNN Corp, right? But yet DNN Corp's not doing these. You guys are, right? And David, you kind of mentioned that in the blog where there is this kind of a shift, in messaging from DNN Corp, going to community. And some people are realizing that, as in you two guys and others. I'm not saying other people aren't, but yet some people aren't really, that it's not soaking in with them yet, right? So, from where I sit as ecosystem manager, I see all the ecosystem advisory groups and people plugging in a lot of different places. And I'm seeing leaders emerge from the community, people that are literally grabbing the bull by the horn. So I, for one, appreciate that. But is there anything that you guys want to say? And Kelly, we'll start with you, as far as, the time we're in here now after the acquisition, the focus on community, and the messaging of there being a shift, and essentially community members picking up areas that previously DNN Corp might have, handled. What do you, I mean, is that a motivation for you guys, or Kelly, what would you say?
Yeah, I think looking back, DNN Corp was kind of a black box. You didn't really have any visibility into what was going on, and it had become a profit-making venture, and people began to treat it as such, as any other company, which is fine. And companies have to make money. But what has happened now with the acquisition by ESW, I believe, is this really a shift in emphasis away from, okay, we are going to be a corporate entity, to we are going to let the open source community really drive the development of the platform. And if you think about it, that's the only way you can go. Even doing commercial development, you have to let your customers drive the feature set that you put into your application. If you don't, you end up building something, spending a lot of money on it that no one wants to use. So this renewed emphasis in the community is really important. And now we're finally getting visibility and the ability to really connect with people like yourself or with Ash. And think about it, just a couple of years ago, there wasn't even any offer about, hey, you want to take the bull by the horns and do the documentation for DNN. Not only was that offer not made, no one wanted to do it because everything seemed to be owned by the corporate entity. There weren't any there wasn't really a reach out into the community that felt, what's the word?
Authentic.
Sincere. Yeah, authentic, sincere. So now we have, and I have to give some props not only to Peter for helping me with the prompt integration prior to the acquisition, because we've been working on that. It took a year essentially for us to get prompt into DNN Core. And a lot of that was slowed down because of the acquisition. But that in and of itself, I thought, was a marker that indicated how the team wanted to move forward in terms of taking good contributions and getting them into the core. But then I have to give a shout out to David as well, because when I met him at the DNN Summit, not last year, but a year before, just his energy was infectious. And I had been in the community for years and had, fallen into that sort of complaining, but really complaining privately about things that I didn't like. And then seeing David's energy really, and I don't want to use the prompt pun, but I have to, it really prompted me to get more involved. And that really, I think it's that infectiousness, that energy that drives a community, that grows a community. And so I wanted to do the same thing. And when I found opportunities where I could involve myself, I did. I haven't been actively engaged in programming in the core over the years, but I found something that I was interested in, that I have really a strong belief in, and that's the documentation. And I know I can do a good job at it. And I know there are a lot of other people that can help do a good job. And I see that happening. I have people who are volunteering to do translations for localizing the doc. So I think that's critical. And that shift in attitude from the corporation has made a world of difference.
Yep, and I think that's evidenced by, like you said, the instant translation of your blog, the comments that are coming, the people that are raising their hands saying, hey, I want to help. We were in a meeting, I think sometime last week, and the analogy that I came up with was that when my parents first dropped me off at college, for, I don't know, 18 years or whatever it was, I was conditioned, I had rules I had to obey, be home at this certain time or whatever. And it took me about 2 or 3 days before I realized, if I want to go to the store, I don't have to ask permission. I just go to the store. If I want to go to the library or wherever, all of a sudden I felt like I had this freedom that I hadn't had before, right? And once I realized that, then, like the shackles were off, so to speak, and I just went crazy. No, I didn't go crazy, but I think that's kind of the point we're at in the community, right? Where it's like, we've been dropped off at college and we have the freedom to do stuff now. It's just, how long is it going to take us as a community to kind of have that realization, right? That, if I want to do documentation, well, I'll just do it. If I want to do the archive releases, that's what I'll do. And so I brought that up in a meeting, and I was like, that kind of hits home. At least it does for me, because I can very vividly remember my first 2 or 3 weeks of college. So,
well, let me give you a good example to kind of follow up on that. Patrick Ryan, who I've known for a number of years, but the community hasn't known until very recently. He's been doing development. Well, he started out as just doing DNN sites for people, but then started doing DNN or doing development for XMod Pro. And when he heard about this new project, he wanted to jump on board immediately. He was probably the first volunteer because he had all of these issues with the documentation that everybody has had. Yeah. And he's one who's done a lot of this stuff. He did this book, a series of videos and stuff. So he has a lot of history in the documentation. That's something he can do. It's something he believes in as well. And he just, once the opportunity was presented to him, then he jumped on board. And I think that's all we really have to do going forward, is make sure that people know that they have those opportunities. Yeah. What is it that you believe in? What is it that you really feel strongly about? You now have the opportunity to make it right, to do the contribution that you were meant to do.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great point, and very recent and valid use case for that analogy we were talking. So, David, I don't want to not give you the opportunity here, because your blog kind of spurred some of this. So when we're talking about the shift here from Corp in the past handling essentially everything, and people just kind of complaining, versus now, like you said, we're able to do stuff. What is your perspective on this shift?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to what you guys are saying, but it's like, we're talking about the archives a little bit here, that was something that, I mean, quite honestly, I was frustrated at, because it got started by Corp, in an effort to help, but it wasn't done in detail the way I wanted it, or the way I felt like the community needed it. So, and that's not to speak bad about who was working on it at Corp, but it's a good example, because it's like, I could have just complained about it. I could have just, just griped and moaned about it, but I didn't. I was like, hey, can I have the keys to these archive repos? And oh, by the way, can you create a few more? Well, the answer was, yeah, sure. That's great. Thanks for the help. And that, I don't know that that's happened in a long time, that kind of thing. So it was my aha moment that, oh, okay, I really can get something accomplished that helps the greater good here, and because, I mean, quite honestly, I mean, there's not the staff that used to be at Corp. So it's like, the resources really aren't there to do that great of a job at things like this. So it's great that we're able as a community to step up and help.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, as I mentioned, you guys are kind of two of the several or handful of people who are kind of realizing, like you said, that aha moment and stepping up and doing things. What would you guys say to the community members who may be considering getting active, or to the community members who would rather throw stones than get active and be that man in the arena? Kelly, what would you say to those people?
Well, to be honest, in any community, you're always going to have a certain group of people that like to throw stones and actually don't want to do anything. I don't want to psychoanalyze them and why they do that. But what I would suggest is that those people who aren't throwing stones, that they just get involved. I mean, if there's something, everybody has their complaints. If there's something that you don't like, go check it out and see if you can fix it. Right. That's kind of the age-old open source mantra is, yeah, you don't like it, fix it. And I would say to those people who are throwing stones, if there's something that really bugs you, it's your responsibility to fix it. Yeah. Stop throwing stones. It's your house. don't break the windows.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. All right, so David, so maybe not for the people who are throwing stones, but what about the people who are considering, like they're on the fence, should I jump in? Because you guys, both of you have jumped in, head first, 100%. But there's some people who may be sitting back and a little bit reserved. David, what do you say to those people?
I'd say, it's kind of, I mean, from a developer's perspective, you put good data in, you get good data out, right? So, let's put some good effort in so that we get some good output out that's, not crap that we're just manipulating to work for our good. So yeah, definitely find a way to contribute. We all have great skills in certain areas that we can contribute and make a big difference, positive difference. And I have to speak to the ones that are throwing stones just a little bit. Suck it up, Buttercup. Let's get this thing done. Let's do it right. Let's stop whining and make a good difference here. I mean, we can't fix everything, but we can certainly play our part, and that'll ultimately make for the greater good.
Right. Yeah. When I grew up or growing up, we played sports in my hometown. Big on football. And painted in our locker room my whole life the saying, make plays, not excuses. And it just rings in my ears all the time, right? Make a play, don't make an excuse. All right. So if people want to get involved with the documentation, Kelly, what do they do?
Well, you can start by responding on one of the blog posts for the documentation. You can give me a shout out, or a shout out to you as well if they want to get involved. You can DM me at DNN Dev on Twitter, and also they can. Yours is at CBPSC.
CBPSC.
Yes,
it's my initials, and in South Carolina, right?
Yeah. So that's probably the easiest way. We also have a group on Slack where we talk.
Yeah.
And so yeah, just give me a holler, and we'll get you on board. Definitely. We need all the help we can get.
Gotcha. All right. So last question for both of y'all. I'll start with you, David. What do you see in the future of DNN, given if the people on the sidelines come down to the field and start playing? What does it look like?
That's a good one. We might have a play for the playoffs. I'm not sure. We'll see, but we might get a wild card spot in the playoffs. So come on down to the field, join the team, and we'll see if we can rally up.
Kelly, what about you?
I'm not sure that I can go with. I can't think of any way to extend that metaphor, but actually, I'm more excited about the community, or actually the platform. Than I've ever been. I've been listening to some of the technology advisory group videos that have been posted. Another important improvement for the community, and I see that DNN is going to be really could be a multi-purpose platform that the opportunities for growth aren't just content management anymore. I think there are a lot of areas it's going to grow into, and if you want DNN to be on the forefront, come down off the sidelines or even out of the stands and jump on, put a helmet on and some pads and get in there.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, I definitely appreciate the time here. It's really great to be able to sit down with you guys. You guys, in my eyes, are really, emerging as leaders. I think a lot of people look up to you. I know I do. And you guys are kind of setting the pace and leading by example. And I'll give you one more analogy or one-liner. One of my college coaches, he used to say, guys, you always hear that the cream rises to the top, right? And he said, and then the analogy of like a Coke float, he says, but the Coke never goes higher than the cream, which is obvious, right? But if the cream is here, then the Coke is here. And if the cream is here, you see what I'm saying? Like, wherever the bar is set by the leaders, that's where people will step up to. So I'm hoping that, the community will continue as we are to have these aha moments and really get active. So appreciate the time. And as always, good to spend some time with you guys. So I appreciate it.
Great chat with you. Thanks.